I want you to get thinking about different ways of thinking. And let's not get trapped in the autism silo. Because autism is a very big spectrum. And at one end of that spectrum, you got Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein had no speech until age 3. And he liked to line things up. Steve Jobs was a weird loner who brought snakes to school and turned them loose. And what would happen to them if they had the autism label? Because I go over to a gifted and talented conference, and I'm seeing the same geeky little nerdy kids over there. But the thing is, you tend to have uneven skills. The other problem you have with autism is it's such a big spectrum. One end, you've got people like me and John that can do high-level work. I'm a college professor. Half the cattle in this country are handling equipment I've designed. And if you want to see that, you can go look at Beef Plant Video Tour with And then you've got people on the other end of the spectrum that are not going to be doing that kind of work. But the problem is, it all has the same name. It's this huge continuum. It's a complicated genetics. It's not like Downs, where it's very, very simple genetics, complicated genetics. A little bit of the trait gives you half of Silicon Valley. If you got rid of all the autism genetics, you wouldn't have any Silicon Valley. In fact, Silicon Valley avoids the labels like the plague. They totally avoid the labels. They don't want to have those kids held back. There's evidence that there's more creative people in the family histories of people with bipolar. And there's definitely more techies in the history of people on the autism spectrum. In fact, my grandfather, on my mother's side, MIT trained engineer right here in Boston, he is the co-inventor of the automatic pilot for airplanes. So I think that's doing pretty good. Okay, one of the things I talk about in the autistic brain that I want everybody to read, and just forget it's in a book that has the word autism on the cover. I want you to forget it. And that's the chapter 7 on rethinking pictures, where I talk about different kinds of thinkers. Now you get kids with labels, and don't get locked into these labels. They're behavioral profiles. In my first chapter, I go into the history of the DSM, and they kept changing what the label meant. It's only half based on science. The other half is they rent conference rooms like this, and the American Psychiatric Association squabbles over these labels in conference rooms in convention centers like this. And there's nothing very scientific about that. But you get kids with various labels, dyslexia, ADHD, Asperger's, autism, and they have uneven skills. They often be very good at something and really bad at something. There's too much emphasis on the deficit and not enough emphasis on building up the strength. And my ability in art was always encouraged. And these kids, they're in elementary school, they'll want to draw the same anime over and over again. You've got to stretch it and broaden it out. Say, well, let's do anime guy's car. Let's do his house. What kind of airplane would he fly on? In other words, make an associative link back to the character. Now I want to go through the different kinds of minds. And that's covered in detail in the Autistic Brain book. And today everybody's got to have evidence-based. Well, I found the scientific research that gives evidence-based for two kinds of visual thinkers. The visual thinker like me, who thinks in photorealistic pictures. And the visual spatial thinker, who's more of a pattern thinker, thinks in patterns. This is your mathematician. This is your computer scientist. My kind of mind is a terrible time with algebra. Doesn't make any sense. Some kids would need to skip algebra and go on to geometry. Just skip algebra. And then the mathematicians, they're going to need help with their language and with their reading. But then they should be allowed to advance ahead in math. I'm hearing too many sad stories where a little 4th grader or 6th graders turned into a behavior problem because they've been making him do baby math over and over and over again. That's just stupid. He's going to need help from you guys in English and reading. That's where that kind of kid tends to have a problem. And then you've got the ones that are the writers, the verbal thinkers. Oh, little professors of history. They know everything about certain things in history that interest them. And there's evidence that these kinds of minds exist. And one of my big concerns right now, with all the emphasis on STEM, is having these minds screened out. What are you going to do with me? I can't do algebra. So how do you get through college? Well, back in '67, when I had to take college math, the fad at the time, and I'm going to say fad because these things go through fads, was finite math, matrices, probability, and statistics. And with 10,000 tons of tutoring, I was able to get through it and get decent grades in that. If it had been algebra, I would have been sunk. But I want to tell you, all you math heads out there, you need us art minds. You want to explain to me why you need the art minds, why you need me. The kind of work that I've done with the cattle is the field of industrial design. See, when you design a product, you have the industrial design side, and then you have the engineering side. Let's go back to Steve Jobs. He was an artist. He wasn't an engineer. Artist. The art mind developed the interface on every single smartphone. In fact, Samsung just had to cough up like millions of dollars to give back to Apple because they ripped off the interface on the smartphone. But that was an artist who did that, not a mathematician. Then the engineer has to make the inside of the phone work. This is where you need the two kinds of minds to make a product like an iPhone. All right, let's get to something where it might even be more serious than that. How about the design of nuclear power plants? Now, there's no way that I could design a nuclear reactor. But maybe I need to be working on the safety systems. Because they made a mistake that I would have never made in a million years. If I'd been drawing up the concrete work for that plant, which is something I am capable of doing, I would have gone, wait a minute. We've got our emergency equipment, our generators for running the emergency pumps in a non-waterproof basement. It's that basic. They put the equipment in a non-waterproof basement. Now, when I was younger, I used to think it was because maybe they were stupid. It's not because they're stupid. It's not because they're stupid. It's because they don't see it. The mathematics mind wouldn't see the water coming over the seawall and instantly flooding the basement. They didn't see it. So you need my kind of mind. Oh, I would have been going, oh, we got to buy submarine doors so you can crank shut. I got to beef up the concrete and make it more sturdy. Put some sump pumps in there. That stuff I know how to design. And if we'd had these simple things, submarine doors, they're not complicated things, we wouldn't have had these problems.